So, this is the time for you to, if you have anything you want me to explain or any questions? Yes?
I just wondered all attachment to one's body.
What's that?
All attachment to one's body. Let go the attachment.
Well, how to let go of attachment to the body? Good question. You're a doctor too. Well, that's where, this is the body is what we are so identified with. That's one of the problems, is that, we have to live with it for its lifespan and in its various phases of good health, bad health, and aging. And then we're also conditioned to think of it as me, so like on my passport there's a photo of my face. It's not a very good one. And not a photo of the rest of me, just of the face. And so we are very strongly identified with the faith we have. And then in practical ways, on a conventional level, it is my body, and that is not to be denied. But attachment means that we have no perspective on it other than just identifying with it. And then of course with that identity comes all kinds, the critical mind, too tall, too short, too fat, too thin, male, female, young, old, and all the rest, go along with the problems of one's physical body. I don't know hardly anybody that's really satisfied with their bodies. In fact, I've known I knew a very glamorous and beautiful woman. I thought was the most beautiful woman alive, and she was very dissatisfied. She thought her nose was too big or something, and so even people that you think of should be completely satisfied don't seem to be, and because it is we compare it, we have standards, fashion and beauty that change, of course, and images held up of what's beautiful and what isn't now, and it's very strongly conditioned by fashion that changes very rapidly. And so we become very, critical of our bodies. How kind are you to your body? Or do you just criticize it? When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Do you say, I don't like that, and the complexion, and then even like vanity is a form of cruelty also, because vanity is always, it's always a very critical function, the nose is too big, too small, eyes are too wide or too narrow, or cheekbones are too high or too low, or too round or too thin, or whatever. And so these are, we suffer a lot from attachment to the body and to its health. We want it to feel strong and vigorous, and then when it gets ill, and then we want to get rid of the illness and want to have a kind of permanent sense of well-being, strength, and good health. So, just observing this, the human body is like this. It's I always found it, living in with Ajahn Chah in northeast Thailand. He's so down to earth and practical about the very basic things like his own body, and so contemplate it. Monks, monastics, we have meditations on 32 parts of the body in which we kind of contemplate, the internal organs and the external appearance, not in terms of judgment as good, bad, beautiful, or ugly, but just what they are. The liquid, the element, solid, and fire elements, air elements, in regard to this physical form. The fact that you can observe your body, like in the four postures in meditation, the sitting, standing, walking, lying down postures, you can observe the body, which isn't, not that which is aware of sitting. It's like you can be aware of your body as it is in the present. Is it the heat or the cold or the pleasant sensations or painful ones or irritating ones, itching ones, whatever. That awareness of the body is what we begin to see is not the body. The body is a condition that changes according to conditions. When it's in a where it's hot, then you feel hot. In a place that's cold, you feel cold. You get tired, hungry, thirsty, and all the rest go along with having the limitation of a human form. Just by meditating on this, observing it, looking at it in a different way, it's not non-attachment to the body isn't just kind of like denying it or dismissing it. It's not condemning it or ignoring it, but it's understanding it. It is, and we begin to see it no longer in the personal way, as my body and I am, this age and this appearance. But one sees it more as a natural condition that's part of this planetary system, and it's a vehicle for us to use and learn from, rather than something to blindly attach to or to deny or get rid of. The suicide wouldn't be the answer to non-attachment. Nor would be trying to preserve it, forever. One is trying to deny it and get rid of it, and the other is trying to keep it forever. But that which is aware of the body. And so I found that, like, in my own experience, because in my own case, I was so identified with the body itself. And then in meditation, in Buddhist meditation, you practice, one of the basic practices is observing the breath, observing the sensations in the body while you're sitting, standing, walking, lying down. And I kept making it into something more than what it is. Because I kept I was used to following formulae, or tell me what to do about how to be mindful of my body, that kind of thing, always expecting some kind of technique or somebody to tell me. But after a while I began to see that wasn't it. It's just that which is aware of it sitting is like this. And it's not saying, not critical, not saying I should sit straighter or better or that, or comparing my posture with somebody else's. It's just beginning to awaken to just the fact that the sitting, is like this, sitting in a chair, the feet on the ground, the pressure of the body on the seat and so forth is like this. And it's not critical, not saying right or wrong, but it's like this. So you begin to start just awakening to the feeling. The body is a sense organ. It's a sensitive form. So, you have to live in this state of continuous, inexorable sensitivity from birth to death. That's why there's so much suffering. We don't get, we fall asleep is the best we can do. But it is, we're trapped for a lifetime in this very sensitive form, and then we don't understand it. So we're always maybe seeking comfort or trying to ignore it, trying to, not, try to get caught up in our minds so we don't have to feel through the senses or through the sensations of the body. But inevitably, as you all are aware of, no matter how much you try to avoid or resist the sensitivity of your body, in the end of the day, it gets the better of you. And and old age, it really comes home, that this body is I can no longer just make it do what I want or force it, like I did when I was younger. I have to learn, how to surrender to its limitations more and respect its limitations. Yes?
No, talking of the body, you used to tell the story of Thailand that you were towering above everybody else and you always called the foreigner and you always felt awkward and embarrassed.
Yeah, so like in Thailand, of course, everybody was shorter, and we lived in a monastery. I was a newly ordained monk, and I was, if you see pictures, there's photos of a line, we're all sitting together in a line, and I'm at the end of the line, and it all goes like this, and then I come like this big white lump sitting there, and of course there's no way I could pass for a Thai on it. And then also, like in Thailand where I live, they're very skilled with their bodies. Like they're very Northeast Thai people, farmers, and that they know how to use their bodies. And it's interesting to watch farmers there in the old-fashioned style, because they have very few farm instruments. They have a kind of hoe and whatnot, but they know how to use it efficiently and use it for all different kinds of things. Where you look into somebody's garden shed here in England, and they've got special instruments for this and that and everything else. And in northeast Thailand, in the old days, they had maybe some kind of hoe and that and a big knife. And they could perform anything. They could make very kind of fine things or coarse things. Another one was to dye the robes. We had to dye them in the jackfruit wood. Jackfruit trees, it's a common enough tree in Southeast Asia and India. And in the scriptures, in the Pali Canon, the way that the monks dyed their robes at the time of the Buddha was with jackfruit dye, which is, it's not the fruit that you use, but the wood from the tree. So you take like a branch or a log of jackfruit, and then you have to chip it, make it into little chips, and then you boil it, and you get this kind of yellowish, brownish dye that comes out of it, out of boiling these wooden chips. And so at this time I was with another Ajahn Prabhakaro. We were up at a branch monastery of Wat Pong, and we were going to dye our robes. And we're both from Seattle, and he's big and very strong man in those days. And so we had this knife and we had this log, and we were hacking away, trying to get, and we get these ratty looking chips, and we were exhausted. Here, two big strong Americans, we were working ourselves to death trying to get proper chips. I don't know how they do this. And then at that time, Ajahn Liam, he's the head monk now at Wat Po, he's small, skinny, didn't look like much, physically. And so he comes and he smiles and he takes the log, takes the knife, and he goes, and a row of beautiful chips fall off. So it was very. It shows how that they're like I was brought up to use the intellect, so I'm guided by my thoughts and ignore the body. Where say in the like Ajahn Liam, Luang Por Liam, he was very well educated actually, but he's a country boy and he knows how to use his body. So he knows how to use the wrist and the weight of the knife and how to hit, cut the chips in a way that very neat. It was very impressive. Row after row of lovely little chips. And here, Prabhakar and I had these kind of ratty looking things. And we were exhausted and he wasn't. But that's like bodily awareness and that come from living in farming communities. Like I think almost anywhere you find farmers have a certain kind of grace and knowledge too, and just doing the practical things that city people don't have a clue how to do very well, especially if you've been in a university. So the Thai monks used to insult me by saying, "You foreign monks, all you know how to do is read books and ride in airplanes." It was not far from the truth. Yeah.
In Buddhist teaching, we hear about trusting the way things are, and yet in everyday life we have to make decisions, we have to influence. How do we reconcile the two things? How do we accept and trust that things are the way they are, and yet?
Well, it's not to trust the way things are, but to trust yourself to be the observer of the way things are. Then you can actually respond to contingencies or special situations. Like if you're programmed just to react out of love and hate, like and dislike, then we're easily manipulated by others or conditions. So you get like the demagogues, politicians that can shout and scream and condemn people and they can arouse your emotions. Like if you listen to Hitler, how he could manipulate large groups of people, for anti-Semitism and so forth. So that it's, you can a tone of voice, a powerful way of speaking, and reaching into a particular culture, and you can manipulate people's emotions, as most politicians try to do anyway. And then because we're conditioned to through fear and our cultural values that we acquire, from various parents and religion and whatnot. We have certain prejudice, biases, preferences. Now with mindfulness, then we can be aware of that. We're no longer just operating from the conditioned habits, or just rebellious attitudes, or just anger and hatred towards. We can hate demagogues and want to kill them. And then with mindfulness, we can be aware of hatred, which means and wanting to kill Hitler, and we can begin to see that as something that as a Buddhist we wouldn't do, but kill, but we might feel like it, and so mindfulness gives us perspective on various things like relationships with others, with the people we have to work with, the society that we're living in, the people we live with, and so forth. We learn through observing. And it's learning to trust that in yourself. That's the important thing, to trust that, to get to recognize this awareness, and then to trust it. It isn't an idea, it's not something that is, you create. It's something you begin to recognize and cultivate in your life. Then you can deal with different conditions that are part of your karma, whatever they might be. But the conditions, are so dependent on other conditions. So we're so easily, intimidated or frightened by things, and like in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, the way of intimidating the crowd, and this is quite ordinary in societies, the way politicians can manipulate our feelings. And we don't know what's happening usually till we are mindful of how the emotions, you say certain words in a certain tone of voice and how they affect you. So, you can say something positive in an insulting way. So, I can say, "You're really a nice guy." Is that a compliment, or it's the tone of voice, isn't it? I say, "You're a really nice guy," and then but you're picking up the tone. I can be insulting you by saying something positive, and this is where learning to trust this awareness of that, because the world is going to present us with different. It isn't going to be what we want; it's what we get. And you have to live in societies the way they are. Even if you don't like the way they are, you can learn from it. Yes.
Can you explain a bit more about the chant that you introduced to the chanting? What's the introduction?
Well, years ago, even before I met Ajahn Chah, I came across this. There is the unborn, untraded. That always impressed me, because I'm quite. I was brought up as a Christian. I'm from a high church Anglican background. My mother was very caught up in Christian mysticism and things like this, so it had quite a powerful effect on my childhood, and it was good. It wasn't a kind of oppressive or unpleasant form of Christianity at all, but it did give me a sense of sacredness, that even when I realized I couldn't really go along with Christian doctrine, I could never really be an atheist either, and just deny things. So, but I didn't quite know where I stood, as I grew up, where to stand on this, because I couldn't agree with the way I would interpret Christian doctrine, and the way it was taught to me anyway. And then, so I tended to even deny it or make fun of it, dismiss it. But there's always still something, a sense of the sacred, and this sense of something beyond just the thinking mind, and atheism is like denying everything, or what. I couldn't really go along with that either. So then, when I encountered Buddhism, I was about 21, and that was something in me could respond to that. Now, a lot of people can think of Buddhism as a kind of atheism, but it's not at all. It's not a denial of God or anything like that. It's attitude towards that, what in Christianity we call God, is really not announced. It's not stated. So it's put into negative forms like unborn, uncreated, unformed. And that's not a denial. It's not making a categorical denial of divinity, but it's also recognizing that ultimate reality, it doesn't have a form. It doesn't have a gender. You can't say it's a patriarchal. It doesn't have any color, but you feel it, you intuit it. So, why is religion such a part of the human experience, no matter whether it's remote jungle tribes or modern civilizations? There's a sense of something beyond just the conditioned realm, or just the awesomeness of the universe. We live in this universe which is rather terrifying when you start contemplating it, and the power and energies that are happening right now, and then the planet itself is going through all kinds of radical changes at this time. So it's beyond our ability to control it or understand it or make it into what we want. But what the Buddha was pointing to was awakening the human individual to this ability to observe. Mindfulness is our ability to get outside our conditioning. Whether ego, sense of self is an ego, or cultural conditioning. It gives us perspective on conditioned phenomena. So this relationship with the unborn and the born, they go together. You're not taking sides. It doesn't make sense that the unborn's better than the born, because then you're back in that you missed the point. But it's the unborn. They depend on each other. It's what they call dialogical, rather than opposed to each other. And you have to choose by denying the condition and in order to rest in the unconditioned. That's the thinking mind again. But it's like the unconditioned is recognized as mindfulness, where it gives you this point of awareness which allows multiplicity to exist at the same moment. It's not focused and denying anything. So it has this broad spectrum to embrace everything at the same moment. Where when we're concentrated on things, then we go from one thing to the other. But with this mindfulness, then sati sampajanya, it gives us this point of ultimate simplicity, which includes multiplicity. So it's beyond thought, but it's recognizable, and it's very simple. But when we try to think about it or define, then it becomes complicated. So in monastic life actually is trying to simplify everything. It might look complicated, monastic life, but it's actually very simple, much more simple than lay life. You don't have all the options and choices, and also its purpose is to cultivate mindfulness within the limitation of a structure that doesn't reinforce the ego or the prejudices or cultural values or whatever that one might have. So it's to give you a kind of moral structure, a way of living in the society that is respecting it and living it in an honorable way without criticizing it or ignoring it or defending it or justifying anything. So it gives us, like here in England, I found living here as a Buddhist monk, it's been very easy to do so, because the attitude of the society here is quite religiously tolerant. So you're not, and even the Church of England is quite friendly. They're not hostile or critical of us. So I mean, you're in a society that has an openness and allows eccentricity, like we're all eccentrics. Or maybe you're the eccentrics. It's another way of looking at it. Because the centric point is this mindfulness. And then there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. Now try to imagine the unborn. Try to make an image. I say make an image of God. When I say, well, when you imagine God, now that would depend on your religion, but immediately, old man up in the sky, like Michelangelo's painting, or Santa Claus even, because, in childhood, you're brought up with this idea of a patriarchal figure. That's a form. That has a quality and a form to it. But the unborn, uncreated, you can't imagine. It's beyond imagination. But it's pointing, what it does is it stops the imagination. And that's where you begin to tune into that level where you're not imagining, but you're still aware. And then then more and more you're aware and recognize the unborn, uncreated, unformed as reality itself. It's where things take place. Where your emotions, thoughts, feelings, your physical experiences arise and cease, come and go in consciousness. So and then the thing about the teaching itself is that there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. If there were not the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, there would be no escape from the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. And I thought, that's a relief. There is a way out. Because before this really struck home, I didn't think there was an escape. I felt trapped. Just felt trapped in a kind of vortex, a whirlpool of habits that I couldn't get any perspective on. And then there is an escape. And so therefore this teaching, this is a kind of essence of what I try to encourage in people like here in England, bring this teaching, make it more conscious. Because even in Theravada, it's not given too great importance in most Theravadan circles. But to me, it's very significant, because then it's like a paradigm, something that gives you a kind of pattern to remember, to reflect on, and then you have a way of dealing with the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned, without just being helplessly reactive and bound and taken over and deluded by it. And that's where, like, mindfulness gives me this perspective on my own karmic tendencies, the way my emotions operate, the fears that I experience, or different anger and resentments and that come up, that I have perspective on it through mindfulness. I'm not just, where before I just felt a victim of it, felt a victim of my conditions. So yes?
You said the unborn and the conditioned realm were dependent on each other. How is the unborn dependent on the conditioned?
Well, in the here and now, in this moment, we're living in the body's born, created, formed condition, and then your thoughts, your emotions, your sensory experiences are all, operating. And this is what we identify with, what we create ourselves in our views and opinions about right and wrong and so forth from the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. But these couldn't possibly operate without the unborn. You see, so that's why as you begin to recognize just through mindfulness, just like putting this into your mind right now. Then as you start reflecting more, rather than just operating from habits, more and more it'll become, this is real, this unborn, uncreated, unformed, this is reality. And then it gives me a way of dealing with the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned, in a perspective. It doesn't deny, doesn't judge, doesn't say anything about them, but it puts them in a perspective that then I can respond, to the existing conditions. It's what like spontaneity or responsiveness rather than just reactivity. Yes?
But how is the unborn dependent on the condition?
Well, it's not dependent, but they go together. This is merely a paradigm, you see. It's a kind of intellectualized pattern, but that I found particularly useful. But eventually you can throw it out too. Yeah?
The Buddha mentioned quite a lot about the benefits and importance of right concentration, especially the jhana concentration. My question is, can mindfulness practice leading to right concentration and jhana concentration?
Yeah, well, this is like, as I was saying before, like when I started meditating, it was very much ego-oriented. There's a problem I found with jhana meditation, which I started with in the beginning. I didn't start with mindfulness. And in Bangkok in 1966, we were all trying to get the jhanas. And then I read Visuddhimagga, about how they describe all this, how to do it. But it was coming from, the ego and an idea I have to get the jhanas before I can do the mindfulness practice. That's the message I had. And so then I became very, controlling. I became a terrible control freak. And just trying to shut up and don't disturb my practice kind of attitudes. And, then I resent people or things, noises or whatever that disrupt concentration. And then sometimes I would get very concentrated, but then I'd lose it. And then there's always this sense of I have it and I've lost it. And so with Luang Por Chah, I found his approach, because he didn't stress that. It was about observing. And this is where I became aware of myself, of the suffering I was creating about me trying to attain jhanas. That was it wasn't the jhanas, it was the attitudes of coming from a self-assertion. And then, of course, that once you see through that self, then of course one can, use concentration practices and they work, but they're no longer coming out of the ego trying to attain and achieve. It's not coming out of that ignorant cultural conditioning. So, like in Samatha Vipassana, people have different views, about samatha and vipassana. But Luang Por Chah was always seeing them in terms of helpful, supporting each other rather than opposing each other or conflicting, which makes more sense. Like if you don't have enough, like a candle, lighting a match or lighting a candle, you light a match and then it doesn't last very long, and if you light a candle, then you can see for quite a while before. So the candle would be like the jhanas, and the light would be the vipassana. So like in, you do get, you can see bits through lighting matches, but then eventually, just like monastic form and the investigating the Dhamma, and then the concentration practices, it's like you're building, a foundation for sustaining the flame of wisdom. But jhanas in themselves, coming from the self view, I found, I couldn't, it didn't like the result of it. And then some, like I've met, there used to be a teacher in Thailand who, I think he's dead now, but he used to hate samatha. He'd say samatha like a curse word. It's samatha. And then vipassana was everything. And then you hear, you have to have samatha first and then vipassana. So then I say, when I hear these pronouncements, like some people say, you've got to get certain jhanas and then vipassana, samatha, then vipassana. What I can know is how that affects me. Or this teacher saying, samatha, it's no good, no samatha, pure vipassana. How does that affect me? I can know that. Or, so this is where I trust the knowing of things rather than the formulas because people can use the formulas, they're not, like, samatha is a curse word, or samatha as the way to enlightenment. It's the same word, but it's said and this you can know how the tone of voice affects you, or who's saying it. That's the important one to trust, is being the knowing of that, rather than taking sides, one or the other. But like I found the Buddha's teaching, one that it's guide. It's always, you look at the Four Noble Truths, and they're pointing always here. Not at me, but at you're looking at yourself, at your mind, and therefore you're not trying to just know all about Buddha's teaching as you memorize it from the scripture, but you're taking the scriptural teaching and applying it, so that you have the insight from the application of the teaching. So that's why it is so practical, because like suffering, dukkha is the most common human experience. It's nothing. It's so banal, so everywhere. Whether you're rich or poor, whatever. It's nothing esoteric, subtle, or mysterious. You couldn't take a more banal subject to make into a noble truth. and yet it's through investigate, through taking this experience of suffering in its various, because we experience it changes. Sometimes there's a lot, terrible things happen to us. Sometimes we're just upset, stressed, unhappy, discontented, is like this. Or whatever, it's not about the amount, but if you begin to identify it, it is a common human experience. And then we investigate it. And then we find the way of not creating suffering. But we still have to live with the changing conditions of our bodies, and the societies we live in and people we live with, that we're not getting out of anything. We're just learning how to learn from, our forms and our karma as we have to live through it. Yes?
Could you say how anatta and emptiness relate to the unborn?
Yeah, well, the emptiness, you got these words like anatta, nibbana, emptiness, nirodha, cessation, unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. They're all, they really amount to the same thing, just slight different angle. And like anatta is non-self. And so this is, people tend to see this as like a denial of self. There isn't any self. And as if it was an intellectual denial. But it's not that way. It's not denying self. It's just recognizing non-self and knowing what self is, how the self arises and ceases according to conditions. Like, your personality will change according to where you are, who you're with, whether you're feeling tired or hungry or whatever. Your ego and sense of self will change according to the conditions, but that which is aware of the self is non-self. And then like nibbana, the word nibbana or nirvana is realizing non-attachment to conditioned phenomena. So it's the reality of non-attachment is like this. And before you can recognize non-attachment, you have to really know what attachment is. To know what self is, and attachment is like you're investigating this sense of me and what I think and my view, my opinion, and my possessions, my life, the way one is attached, and creates oneself, and the awareness of attachment, awareness of the ego, is non-self and nibbana. And that's reality. You see, so it's not that, like they talk about attaining nibbana. It's not an attainment. You can't attain it. You recognize, you awaken and recognize non-attachment. You can't make yourself non-attached, but you can recognize suffering through attachment, and then you let go of what you're attached to through seeing that you're creating suffering out of ignorance, rather than that you needn't suffer like this once you recognize it. Yes?
When you're talking about this unborn, this awareness, it's something like kind of like an ultimate refuge you can have with me. I don't know, we're also talking about something like unconditional love and this great courage and clarity, intelligence, all these qualities. Is this something related, these two?
Well, like love, the word love is in English it's used for so many different things, and then like unconditioned love, and then there's romantic love, and then there's oftentimes it's used for just liking something, but it is an important word. And then in like often sometimes people question me about Theravada Buddhism because it sounds so kind of loveless, like it doesn't sound like I'm talking about kind of annihilation. We just one Catholic priest years ago described that as cold surgery, Like a scientist in a laboratory, he's taking things apart. And what about love? And so that's a fair enough question. And then of course, love is, when you talk about love, it tends to inspire people. And you talk about suffering, it doesn't inspire. And so, it's like love, unconditional love is a very inspiring concept. And suffering isn't inspiring, but there is a way out of suffering can be inspiring. That's what inspired me, is there's a way out. It doesn't inspire me to think in terms of everything suffering and leave it at that. But then in terms of my own investigation, like I found, like unconditioned love, we have this metta practice in the Brahma Viharas, and so the first Brahma Viharas, metta, translated generally in English as loving kindness, and then it how to apply metta, because when I first became aware of this idea of metta, it was too superficial. Like it was like you're just trying to be terribly nice about everything, and so you're always being positive, and it's too nice for me to think of it in those terms, because I'm not that nice. But taking it into, if it's unconditioned love, saying how the Christians use unconditioned love and metta, and then we have these formulas for metta practice in Theravada, and so may all beings be free from suffering. It's kind of categorical statements, of all sentient beings, and then you have the metta, Karanya Metta Sutta, where it's loving kindness is for all beings, devils, angels, a whole lot, no exceptions. That's unconditioned love, but it doesn't mean liking, and it doesn't mean you have to love devils and demons in the way that it might sound, but it's like not hating, not averse, not criticizing.
Question actually is more about the source of the love. Is the source of the love or the good quality within a human being is related to this unborn? We're talking about this unborn state, which is we can rely upon this, we can have refuge.
Yeah, it's our very basic nature.
And these two is more related.
Well, unconditioned love is the very basis of everything. It's without that there'd be nothing to hold it together. Love is unitive. The idea of love is it unites. It doesn't separate. And so the underlying unconditioned unborn can be interpreted as love, unconditioned love.
If we find a way to out of suffering and we can step out to find this way, not being conditioned, not being trapped within the condition, do we step into this unconditional, including unconditional love, we can experience all these extraordinary qualities?
Well, it's this is where that's how we relate when with its mindfulness is through that, through metta, karuna, through compassion for mudita, joy, and upekkha, equanimity. So these, they're called the divine abodes, Brahma Viharas, and then they operate out of that emptiness. They're ways of responding individually to particular situations. So, metta basically is an attitude of non-aversion, it's not being stupid and not noticing anything, but it's not creating, hating, and getting caught up in like liking or disliking. It's aware of liking and disliking. And then metta allows a kind of equanimity toward conditioned phenomena, which we're no longer just reacting to the qualities of the conditions. And then in the karuna mudita, which are about the suffering, the misery we see around us, and the beauty, the joy of life as mudita. But it's no longer coming from the ego or desire, but it's spontaneity toward particular situations. And so, like compassion, then comes out of wisdom rather than out of me feeling sorry for poor people or something. It's not a patronizing there, but for the grace of God go I kind of feeling. It's more recognizing through one's own understanding of suffering. And then, what's happening now, like you hear all this terrible news from Pakistan with all these floods and whole villages, people suddenly, everything's gone, and you feel karuna, compassion. It isn't indifference. Because you understand on the human level what that's nothing like that's ever happened to me, personally. But one can, understand the loss of, what that would be like. You can have compassion for that. And then when it's happening to you, then it's better to have more upeka and metta and upeka, and trusting in your ability to survive in catastrophic situations. But it's like we all have these mechanisms. When in catastrophe, we are mindful. When your physical life is being threatened, you don't have to remind yourself to be mindful. You just are. There's something instinctual and self-preservation operating. When you feel a life-threatening experience. But it's in the especially the misery of middle class existence, because you can take so much for granted. You can become totally neurotic, and because you feel safe, you aren't on the edge of survival. You can feel sorry for yourself and be jealous of the neighbors and carry resentments that automatically drop when your life is in danger. That's why you can see that so much of the interest in Buddhist meditation, almost in any country, whether it's here or America or Thailand, Sri Lanka, so much of the interest now in meditation is from that kind of middle class element, because you've got a kind of security, a kind of illusion of security. You aren't out trying to just survive anymore, and so we have become quite neurotic through imagining and fear and envying and resenting things that will automatically drop when you feel your life is being threatened. It's like climbing mountains and things like that. Last Monday, going to the Skellig Michael, they had to climb up these ancient steps, 600 steps. Very irregular. I was very mindful. Not because I practice mindfulness, but because of the situation. And then coming down, we got up there and the weather was all right, and then this cloud descended over the island and it started raining, and that increased the mindfulness. Coming down these old steps, that are slippery with the rain, and you're a 76-year-old man whose sense of balance isn't so great anymore. You still have this survival sense. You're with the body and the place you're in, and then you get back to where you're staying. And I stayed in the Sunyata meditation place in near Shannon. And then Bart and Marion gave me a nice room, and I had Buddha shrine. And I could have gone quite neurotic then, but I didn't. But the conditions were no longer threatening. You're all alone, nobody to see. Just Buddha shrine. Yes?
What qualities did you see that made you get the new habit? Because you've got a very tough job. I wonder what qualities
It's intuition. No, I felt well. I've always I've very great love for Asia, and I've in some ways felt the regret having to live away from Asia most of the time. So then, but I thought I'd never get the chance to go back and live there, because I was quite committed to staying here till I dropped dead. And then the conditions changed when Ajahn Amaro accepted my invitation. And then I realized I was free to more or less go where I wanted to. And so ever since, I've been committed to monasteries for 44 years. And in leading, for much of that time, most of that time, been the head of monasteries. So it's just that sense. It's kind of a relief to not be the head of a monastery, and have just open-ended options. And so I'm incredibly grateful to Ajahn. So I want you all to make it as easy as possible for him. Don't give him a bad time.
No one wanted the job.
Well, that's true. So I think I'll